Alrighty, so if you enjoyed that madness that we saw in match week number 19 and especially the Saturday action, good news is we got more MLS games. That's going to be coming up not far from now. In fact, we are once again going to have a lot of games that's going to be happening in the middle of the week. Starting tomorrow, we do have a Tuesday game, and then there's going to be 10 games that's going to be happening on a busy Wednesday night. And in total, there's going to be 11 games that is going to happen in terms of match week number 20 of the midweek action. But we start off with the first game, which is the game that's going to happen tomorrow between Austin FC versus the Houston Dynamo. And unfortunately, this game is on Twitter. Just as you thought that maybe in the middle of the week, maybe we will escape from having to watch a Twitter stream, and that you know, I've mentioned many times about how bad Twitter is that at least we only get to endure once during the weekend, and at the very worst, it might be a back-to-back. Yeah, it seems like we have to endure in the middle of the weekend. I think this is the first time that we actually do have a Twitter stream in the middle of the week, because usually Twitter stream happen on the weekend. But this game will start at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:08 p.m. local time. Austin is red hot right now, 11-4-4, and coming into this game after getting a big win in the last game against Atlanta United. Whereas for the Houston Dynamo, they were involved in that crazy game against FC Dallas. And it's also going to be interesting to see, not just for the Houston Dynamo, but as I will talk about FC Dallas a little bit later, we'll see whether if both of these teams might have the same energy heading into their respective midweek games. Because when you play 105 minutes of soccer, and especially 105 minutes in that Texas heat in Houston, yeah, it could be very draining toward your body, and especially you have to do that in a short week. You know, it could be draining on your body too. But that being said, Austin also have a short week in terms of have to come back from the East Coast and now flying back to Austin. They'll probably be a little bit exhausted too, and not to mention this is also going to be another game that's going to be and expect to be a hot one. I mean, even though I know it's a night game, it's an 8:08 p.m. start, so a bit of a late start in Austin. Expect the temperatures to still be very hot in this one. But in terms of the all-time meeting, Austin has pretty much dominated this meeting between them and the Dynamo, 3-0-1, and that include the last time that both of these teams faced off each other earlier this season, where Austin was able to win 2-1. Before that, Austin did win 2-1 against Houston at home before the Dynamo did get their only win in this rivalry by winning 3-0 against Austin, and then Austin, of course, won 3-2 against the Houston Dynamo. And again, I forgot to check the Copa Tejas standings, and I should have put the Copa Tejas standings in terms of where each of the Texas team is, and I believe Austin pretty much leads that list, because I think Austin, of course, didn't they get a victory against FC Dallas, and I know they have got a victory against the Houston Dynamo, and if they can win this again, you know, they definitely have an upper hand in terms of winning the Copa Tejas, and that I think it's safe to say that they're by far the best Texas team out of the free bunch, and it's been proven in the standings, being in second in the standings, and are not giving up in terms of trying to get that top spot. Like, this is a team that, you know, not only now that they've proven that they are for real, they're chasing down LAFC in terms of that top spot. And even though LAFC seems to be kind of winning every single week, Austin is not that far behind, because they're also winning every single week, especially on the road, with them coming into this game after having a 4-game winning streak on the road, though this one is going to be at home. Now, moving on in terms of the next match, we got Atlanta United versus RSL. Now, this is going to be a very interesting game, because this is the first game since the message that Joseph Martinez basically sent toward his teammate, and especially toward the front office. Well, I think message is kind of a low-key way to say it. It was more of a tirade that Joseph Martinez basically said after the loss against Austin FC, where he not only is not happy of how the team is not playing well, but he basically sound off on the front office and have ridiculed the front office with the way that they have basically destroyed the championship core that they had in the beginning of their franchise existence, and that they really kind of destroyed what would have been just a team that, you know, Atlanta could have been like LAFC right now with how well they could sustain in their early life in MLS. And, you know, in this game, they do play against RSL, who coming into this game with an 8-6-5 record. And no doubt RSL has down a little bit after they also kind of got onto a hot form when they were back in June, but in July it hasn't been going so well for this RSL team after getting a very disappointing 2-2 draw against the Colorado Rapids in that game where they blew a 2-0 lead against their Rocky Mountain Cup rival. But for Atlanta United, like I said, it's going to be very interesting to see how the players would respond to this, and also how the front office would respond on this, because as I mentioned, Josef Martinez, he's on his last year of contract, and it might be unthinkable the fact that Josef Martinez could potentially leave the team, but there could be a reality, and when you decide to sound off like that, yeah, that's not going to help the front office cause in terms of trying to keeping him along, and especially we talk about one of the criticism that Josef Martinez has with the front office is them just getting rid of pieces when they don't necessarily need to get rid of, and that I won't be surprised that this could be the case where a couple years ago it would be unthinkable that Josef Martinez could be leaving Atlanta United, but it could still be a big possible case. But before we get to that point, like I said, let's see how they, of course, bounce back in this game against RSL, which this game will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. Atlanta does have an advantage in the all-time meeting, though it's only been 3 meetings, as this is only the 4th time that both of these teams face off against each other. Atlanta has a 2-0-1 record, though the last time both of these teams face off against each other, RSL did get the 2-1 win against Atlanta United before Atlanta won 2-0 against RSL, and then Atlanta winning 3-1 against RSL now in this game, and that, yeah, we'll see how Atlanta can bounce back of what has really been a tough kind of run of them throughout these past couple of games. And also keep an eye on me potentially making a video talking about Atlanta United and the struggle that this team has gone through this season. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, we got the Chicago Fire versus Toronto FC. So again, this was almost a wooden spoon derby in the Eastern Conference, because Chicago, they're currently I believe they're currently dead last right now in the East after that implosion that they had against Columbus, and Toronto FC, of course, they're not doing any better with them. Also kind of had a bit of a mini implosion with them blowing a 2-1 lead late in the game and had to salvage for a draw against the Quakes, and then they're sitting at 11 with a 5-4-10 record. This game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. There's a lot of 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific start in this midweek action, which means that, yeah, when that of course happened, most likely especially I am actually thinking about ground hopping on Wednesday too. Yeah, it's going to be tough in terms of trying to keep an eye on all of these games, and maybe I'll just end up once again doing what I did on Saturday, which is, of course, watch some of the condensed highlights of some of these games. But in terms of the all-time meeting, TFC does have a 14-11-9 advantage against the Fire, and in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup, it's been pretty one-sided in favor of TFC. They won 3-2 against Chicago before winning 3-1 against the Fire, then winning 2-1 on the road against the Fire, and then it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams before another 2-2 draw between both of these teams. So, we'll see how both of these teams is going to respond after, both of them, well, in one team cases, they drop points at home after giving up late goal, and then in the other team cases, they just completely imploded and got nothing at home, and see who can get a needed bounce back in this midweek game. I mean, you could also say that in some way this is kind of a desperation derby with both of these teams desperately trying to bounce back and erase what a nightmare of a weekend that they had just this Saturday. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, we got FC Cincinnati versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. So Cincinnati have a 7-5-7 record, while the Whitecaps has a 7-3-9 record. This game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:08 p.m. local time. The all-time meeting, both of these teams, believe it or not, have actually met once before, and it was the Whitecaps with a victorious 2-1 victory against FC Cincinnati, which, again, is not a big surprise because that was back in, I believe, in 2019. The 2019 FC Cincinnati team, as we've seen in the first free edition of the FC Cincinnati team in their first 3 years existing, is not good whatsoever. But this time, this is definitely a different FC Cincinnati team, and for the Whitecaps, they definitely have cooled little bit, and especially they're still trying to find their role form a little bit, and that it's not going to be easy to get themselves all 3 points against a rejuvenated Cincinnati team. Though that being said, Cincinnati this season has struggled to get result at home. I mean, while this has been a good team on the road, at home so far, I think they've only won like 3 games so far at home, and that, yeah, I mean, they're kind of started becoming like the New York Red Bulls in the earlier this season, where for whatever reason it defies all odds the fact that that you see an MLS team struggle at home, but when they go on the road, they tend to do very well. But we'll see whether or not if Cincinnati can rectify that, as they're looking to get 3 points against a Whitecaps team that their playoff hope and their playoff contention definitely took a bit of a blow after losing to a team that they could be fighting for those last couple of precious spots in the Western Conference, that is Minnesota United. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is DC United versus the Columbus Crew. So, I talked about how Atlanta United, and it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back and what their reaction is going to be. I'm also very interested to see how DC is going to do, and especially, this past couple of days, and really just yesterday, there was a bombshell that was dropped that Wayne Rooney could potentially be the next head coach of DC United, and it even gone as far as Wayne Rooney being spotted at Dallas International Airport, and that it seems like he is on his way to become the next head coach of DC United, which if that does happen, I'll definitely make an individual video about that, because I don't think anybody saw this one coming, with the way that Wayne Rooney was going to be the answer to be their next head coach of DC United. But at least for this game, they're going to be playing against the Columbus Crew, who has a 6-7-5 record, while DC have a 5-2-10 record. But if we know one thing about Columbus, they've been playing much better on the road, especially. They were on the better end of that incredible implosion that the Chicago Fire has had in the last game. Both of these are the last game that the two teams play against each other. But this game will also start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:08 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, DC does have a 38-11-35 record over Columbus, as both of these teams have played a lot, knowing the fact that both of these teams were the original 10 teams that came into the league back in '96. Last 5 head-to-head matchup, it was the Crew winning 3-0 against DC, before the Crew winning 3-1 on the road against DC, though DC did get a 4-2 win against Columbus on the road, before Columbus winning 3-1 against DC, and then DC, of course, winning 1-0 against the Columbus Crew. So, at least in the last 5 head-to-head matchup, Columbus does have a slight advantage, and that that they're looking to get another 3 points on the road, especially against a DC team that, again, I think the only good part about that 7-0 loss that they suffer against the Philadelphia Union is that at least they maybe has a chance to kind of make amends of that, and that, as bad as that loss is, keep in mind, it's still only 1 game. So, I mean, it might be embarrassing in terms of the fact that they got absolutely run out of the park, but at the end of the day, it's still just kind of a loss, and that people kind of forget that this team also got that big victory against Orlando City in the previous game. So if they can get another big victory in this one, then maybe that can numb the pain in terms of the 7-0 defeat that they suffer in the hands of the Philadelphia Union. And yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can do that against a Columbus team that all of a sudden started to do very well on the road. But now moving on in terms of the next match, and speaking of a team that of course scored 7 goals in the last game, that of course is the Philadelphia Union. So they're going to be on the road against Inter Miami, and again, I know the Unions are pretty much on cloud 9 after probably having their best performance in franchise history. But if there's one thing that I will say, just like what I said about DC United, it's only 1 game. It's only 3 points. I mean, you can score like 8 goals and break the record, and it could be impressive, but at the end of the day, it's only 3 points, and they only count as 1 win. And I've seen before where sometimes when teams have that kind of a lift, they can potentially have a big letdown, and they better not have that, because they're playing against an Inter Miami team that Inter Miami wants to bounce back. I mean, last game, we talk about a lot of teams that's suffering brutal defeat. Inter Miami, I think, is going to be right up there in terms of suffering the most brutal defeat during the Heineken rivalry weekend, match week number 19, with them losing 1-0 to Orlando City and gifting them an own goal to lose that Florida derby. But coming into this game, Miami has a 6-4-8 record, while the Union has an 8-9-2 record, as this game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:08 p.m. And also, fingers crossed, this game is not going to be delayed, because, like I said before, anytime when there's a game happening in Florida, I always just cross my fingers that it's not going to be delayed, because it seems like if there is a chance that a game could be delayed, it's usually going to be those Florida team, especially when they're playing at home. Now, in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup, it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams before it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. Then Miami did get their first win in this head-to-head meeting by winning 2-1 on the road before the Union did win 3-0 against Inter Miami, and then the Union, of course, winning 2-1 against Inter Miami, though that was back in the MLS Matchweek tournament, which Inter Miami fans definitely do not want to remember how they did in the MLS Matchweek tournament. But yeah, like I said, Inter Miami looking to try to bounce back, and so far they definitely have done very well at home. I mean, it's been a long time since they've lost a home game at Drive Pink Stadium, and against a Union team that, at least when you look at the last couple of games that they play on the road, it's not been great. I mean, it's been pretty bad, especially the last road game that they play against Columbus, where they were very lucky they got a draw that one. If it wasn't for Andre Blake just doing his peak Andre Blake impression and just once again stealing points for the Philadelphia Union, they probably would have lost that road game too. And we'll see whether or not if Blake can once again maybe steal some points for the Union, in case if the Union does going to have a big letdown after that 7-0 thrashing that they handed DC United just a couple of days ago. But that being said, I am now going to switch boards and look at the last 5 games that's going to be happening in terms of the Wednesday night action. So moving on, in the next game, we got Minnesota versus Sporting KC, also known as the nicest rivalry in MLS. And, I kind of feel like we need to stop saying this is the nicest rivalry in MLS. As a Loons fan, I kind of don't appreciate it in a way where it feels like it's another one of those forced rivalry that MLS is trying to make, and that in general I don't really have any beef towards Sporting KC. Maybe besides the fact that they of course always tends to be a nightmare team to play whenever it's at Children's Mercy Park, and maybe also those U.S. Open Cup loss, though, to Sporting KC. They probably will say that, yeah, we don't like playing against Minnesota, especially on the road, and we have not forgotten the 3-0 defeat that we suffered against the Loons in the playoffs back in 2020. But that being said, as the media portrayed that this is the nicest rivalry in MLS, you knew that maybe this was going to be on national television, and indeed it was, as this game is going to be on ESPN, as this game was also started at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Minnesota has an 8-3-8 record, while Sporting KC have a 5-4-11 record. Now, in terms of the all-time meetings, Sporting KC does have the edge, 10-3-6, but in terms of them playing at Allianz Field, yeah, it's been a graveyard for them. Like, they have not gotten a win against Minnesota at Allianz Field in a very long time. In fact, I think they only won once when they play against the Loons at Allianz Field. But in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup, it was a 2-1 win that Minnesota had against Sporting KC before Sporting KC drilled the Loons in the meeting at Children's Mercy Park 4-0. There was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams, and then I of course mentioned the playoff game where the Loons were able to win 3-0 against Sporting KC, and then Sporting KC of course winning 1-0 against Minnesota. And that, for once, I would say that this is probably the first time in a long time that I can say that the Loons are actually favorites coming into this one, which usually doesn't end up well, because they always like to have that underdog kind of mentality, and that I feel like we're once again seeing it, where when I don't put a lot of expectation for this team, they turns out to play well. But when I actually decide to put some expectation and maybe things were going to go right, then they start to falter. So I'm just hoping that's not the case, and especially they've been on a very good run of form with them winning 3 straight games and have scored 9 goals in the past 3 games, and are actually now very close to potentially climb all the way up into the top 4 of the Western Conference, because right now there seems to be a logjam between 3rd all the way down to 9th, where I think it's only separated by 4 points right now. So if you can get a win and other teams of course lose, which I think Minnesota got a lot of help in the weekend's action, where pretty much every single team around them either lose or drop points in those games. So yeah, there could be a chance that they could get themselves high up the standing. But like I said, anytime when I have expectation and anytime when this team is favorites in the game, it does make me nervous because they'll probably won't deliver at the end of the game. And especially Sporting KC, I mean, I don't want to say that they have been playing better, because when you look at some game, it still kind of looks the same. But at least they're at a level where they have gone from being incredibly bad to now kind of being a little bit inconsistent. And I think that's considered an upgrade, consider how much of a disaster season that Sporting KC has had this year. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is Nashville SC versus the Seattle Sounders. So this is a matchup that I'm familiar with because I've attended this game. Although this time it's going to be at Geodis Park instead of being at Lumen's Field. And I'll always remember that moment and how, I definitely enjoyed that moment, maybe mainly because Nashville was able to get the win and definitely wipe the smile and the sadness in terms of the Seattle fans in that cold and drenching rain at Lumen's Field at night. But it was still a good game, and it was a game where it was a very typical Nashville kind of road game where they got all 3 points. Now the problem is they're playing at home in this one, and we know that this season when they play at home, that's been a big problem for them, as they have only sitting at 2 wins at home at Geodis Park and have a 7-6-6 record, and the Sounders have an 8-2-8 record, and the Sounders of course coming off of a 3-0 loss against the Portland Timbers, where it feels like everything was against them in that one. And as I said, this game will be starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is actually not 7:30 p.m. It's actually 7:38. As this is not one of those MLS games that it actually kicked off the advertised time. But like I said, the only meeting was the one earlier this season where Nashville, of course, were able to get a 1-0 win, and see whether or not they can do so. And you kind of sense that they really want to get themselves a win, especially at home, where again it's been a struggle for Nashville this season at home, and that they got to figure this out because they have a lot of home games in their backlog of the schedule, and that right now it just feels like in some way that kind of reminds me a little bit of the 2020 Portland Timbers side, or not the 2020 Timbers side, but more like the 2019 Portland Timbers side. Remember how the Timbers were doing okay in the beginning of the season after they gone for like a 12-game road trip, and then once they got back home at Providence Park in a place where everybody thought that they were going to do well and they were going to make a crazy resurgence, they didn't do that. They barely made it to the playoffs that season before losing in the first round, and it feels like maybe this is going to be the same case for Nashville, where again they're still trying to make Geodis Park to act as the fortress, and that it just hasn't been the case with them really struggling this season and have only won 2 games out of I think 6 games now that they play at Geodis Park. But moving on, in the next match, we got the Colorado Rapids versus Orlando City. So this game will start at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Orlando has an 8-4-7 record after fresh off of a 1-0 win against Inter Miami. While the Rapids, they did salvage themselves a 2-2 draw in the Rocky Mountain Cup, but their record is still not good, 5-5-8 coming into this game. And in terms of the all-time meeting, Orlando holds a heavy favorite in this one, and that seems like they do enjoy playing the Colorado Rapids because they have a 5-1-2 record over the Rapids, though in the last game, not so much for Orlando City fan because they lost 2-1 against the Colorado Rapids, but they did win that crazy 4-3 game against the Rapids before Orlando did win 2-1 on the road against Colorado, and then it was a 2-0 win that Orlando has against the Rapids. Then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. Now, like I said, according to the Orlando City theorem and the inconsistent theorem that they've been going through this season, this means that it's probably going to be a loss or a draw. But looking how Colorado has played, and especially them now losing back-to-back home games after they got on that incredible run where they didn't lose a single game for like 23 straight matches, you wonder that incredible home form that the Rapids might have been now did, and especially that they want to desperately get a win in this one, with the way that this has been a very disappointing season for Robin Fraser and the team that last season, I think a lot of the reason why the Rapids they finished first isn't really because the fact that it was a fluke, even though I know a lot of people are saying that, but it just feels like that willpower that they had, and that belief that the team, of course, is a star. That kind of philosophy is started to be lost with this team, because again, they just haven't played up to the level, and kind of punching above the shoulder. Though I would say that maybe this has started to be kind of the level that we thought the Colorado Rapids was going to be, where is a team that is just clearly lacking in terms of the talent pool. And this is also where is no wonder why Rapids fans are kind of frustrated with the fact that, yeah, this is why as much as this team could be such a good team, if investment is not coming from this team, especially from the ownership, that's of course what we're seeing with this Colorado Rapids team. But like I said, they're desperate to try to get all 3 points, especially against an Orlando City team that, again, they're due for a draw or a loss according to the form that they've been in this season. But now moving on, we got FC Dallas versus NYCFC, as this game will start at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:08 p.m. local time. And speaking of teams that have struggled at home so far this season, at least in these last couple of games, Dallas has really struggled at home. In fact, I think they've now gone 4 games without a win at home, and home was supposed to be a place that Dallas earns a lot of their points and that they tend to be very solid. Now, if they want to fix their home form, it's not going to be easy, because they're facing against the defending MLS Cup champion, that is NYCFC, at 9-5-4, as I mentioned. But what's kind of weird about the all-time meeting between both of these teams, there's been a lot of draws. Like the 6 meetings that they've been playing, 4 of them has ended up in a draw, with both teams getting 1 apiece. In fact, the last meeting between both of these teams was unsurprisingly a draw. It was an incredible 3-3 draw between them and FC Dallas before it was a 1-1 draw the last time both of these teams played at Toyota Park. Then NYCFC won 3-1 against FC Dallas. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then a 2-2 draw between Dallas and NYCFC. So something tells me that this could be another game where it can end up to be a draw, but again, we'll see whether that is the case. And again, we'll see whether, I said this earlier about Houston, and said the same thing about Dallas again. How much energy do they have in this one after battling for 105 minutes in such a mental and also physical kind of game against the Dynamo? Usually for many teams, it takes a lot to try to recover that and once again and look sharp in the very next game. Now they have to do it in 3 days, and that usually can really take a toll on a team. Whereas for NYCFC, they have to travel, well, not exactly across the other side of the country, but anytime when you have to travel on a short week, it is definitely going to be tough. And let's see whether or not if the fatigue is going to be there too, and especially this game also playing in the hot Texas summer, and even though this being a night game, I won't be surprised that maybe we might see some fatigue happening in the second half between both of these teams, and maybe both of these teams might actually think about going for early on, because they don't want to wait, and especially don't want to chase the game, knowing that the fact that fatigue could be an issue heading into the second half. But now moving on into the last game on this board, and we saved the last game of the midweek action for the best, because it is the Cali Clasico between the LA Galaxy versus the San Jose Earthquakes, which will start at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:05 p.m. local time. I forgot to mention this game is also going to be on national television. It's going to be on FS1, as the Galaxy have an 8-3-7 record, while the Quakes have a 4-7-7 record. The Galaxy, of course, does have the all-time meeting in this Cali Clasico with a 40-17-32 record, but recently, in terms of the Cali Clasico, it's been relatively even. The Quakes did win 2-1 the last time both of these teams played at Dignity Health Sports Park. In fact, they've had a relatively good record against the Galaxy at Dignity Health Sports Park, going all the way back to 2017. But before that, they did lose 3-1 against the Galaxy, though that game was at PayPal instead of originally being scheduled to be at Stanford Stadium. Then the Galaxy did win 1-0 against the Quakes, but then on the other meeting at Dignity Health Sports Park, the Quakes put one of the biggest score line and one of the biggest thrashing we've seen in the Cali Clasico, with them winning 4-0 on the road against the Galaxy, and then they also won 2-1 against the Galaxy in the other Cali Clasico meeting. So yeah, when you look at the last 5 half-time meeting, it's been relatively even in that. Again, if there is a place where I said last week Toronto was a place where the Quakes could get their first win because they tend to do well against Toronto, especially the last couple of games. It's the same case this time for the Galaxy, and especially with the Galaxy coming off of that El Tráfico loss, and a game where, again, anytime when you play in El Tráfico, it can be very mentally and physically demanding. So, we'll see whether fatigue could be an issue for them in this one, even though they didn't have to travel a lot. And I would say the same thing about the Quakes too. Again, anytime when they have to travel all the way across the other side of the country for a short week, them going to the East Coast and now going back to the West Coast on a short rest, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they will do, and whether or not that this is finally the game where the Quakes can snap out of this woeful road record that they had this season, still searching for their first road win of the year. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all 11 of these games that's going to be happening in the middle of the week. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.